Hello and welcome to Founded, an airwave media podcast, where we find the stories you missed in history class because the tea was hot before they dumped it into the harbor. I'm Tori Phantom, and joining me today is someone that once had shiny pants that sounded like a duck, Gwenna Lathland.
Quack.
Thank you for the quack. That was much appreciated.
Thought I'd help that out. Just really set in the scene there.
Okay, so our pop quiz today, let me tell you, is going to be a real test of how well you've been paying attention.
Not very well.
I mean, I feel like you've been surprising yourself recently. I'm proud of you.
Okay. Tori, you asked me this, what should we title this last episode? I was like, what did we talk about?
Listen, it's going to be
like... We talked
like...
about Abigail Adams' husband, but I didn't remember that at the time.
That was 2 episodes ago.
Okay.
Pop quiz!
I think I mentally checked out for a whole episode. I mean, I was paying attention at the time, but my brain was like, we don't need to retain any of this. It feels unimportant. You're going to have a quiz on this later. Whoop.
I feel like it's going to come back to you. Are you ready?
I will.
What were London agents?
They were the dudes responsible for communicating the interests of the colonists to the Parliament, but they didn't have any voting power or any act. They were the yappers.
See? You do remember. What is George Grenville well known for?
Being a whiny baby because King G3 didn't like him as much as he liked Lord Butt.
Butte, yes. And what did he do when he was Prime Minister in Great Britain?
He did the thing that was like, hey, we could get more money out of the colonists we promised not to tax. How about the American something act, the Sugar Act?
Yeah, American Duties Act.
American Duties Act.
Go. That was many episodes ago. Okay. Who were Francis Bernard and Thomas Hutchinson?
Francis Bernard was the royal governor of Massachusetts at the time that the Sugar Act went into effect, and Thomas Hutchinson was the lieutenant governor.
Yes.
At the time. And then he also he was supposed to do a whole bunch of things. He wasn't supposed to get that position. James Otis Sr. was supposed to get it, but then he ended up getting it, even though he said he wouldn't.
That was for the judge.
The judge thing.
Yes.
And then he got the lieutenant governor.
Exactly, because our boy Thomas Hutchinson held every title. That was he was a collector.
Was he the Nepo baby? No, that wasn't the Nepo baby. That was Francis Bernard. His cousin was somebody important, and that's because he started in Jersey. Everything is legal in New Jersey, and then moved to Massachusetts.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, last question here. It's a 2-parter. First, give me a quick synopsis of the Sugar Act.
Hey, stop smuggling. Dock workers, you can't take bribes. It's actually more beneficial for you to not take bribes of the sugar thing, because if you find people smuggles, you get to keep. And also Francis Bernard and Thomas Hutchinson get a cut, but whatever, that's unimportant. The dock workers also get to keep stuff on the boat that they think is stealing. And then there was some other stuff with how much you would have to pay in the duties and how much you would have to do other stuff. But mostly it was the stop smuggling, and the government gets to keep a bunch of stuff if they even friggin' think you were smuggling on their boat.
Yeah. And basically they became immune to being charged if they illegally did search.
And even if they did get charged, the government who was bringing the charges got to pick what court they went to. Which at no point
jury
ever stacked the decisions.
Right, of course. Now, why was this a big deal?
Because the colonists like to smuggle crap. No, because
that's true. You're not wrong.
Because a bunch of guys, mostly led by Samuel Adams, was like, hey, bro, you can not call it taxes, but it's still pretty much just taxes. But he was basically saying, you can't tax us, and I don't care that you called it a different name. It's still a tax. And all we've got is those London agents, and they barely listen to us in the first place, and they can't do anything about it. So,
and the Sugar Act ended over a century of salutary neglect, where The mother country was basically hands off, and the colonies were governing themselves.
Right, because what they were doing in the colonies and what they were producing was helpful for the British economy, but then the French and Indian War broke out and they started arguing about territory, and then it got expensive to have all this new territory. And so they're like, we need money. Let's get it from the colonists. It's all their land. Money. And the colonists are over here like, we didn't want Ohio. Y'all wanted Ohio. We were cool Pennsylvania, but no.
Why are we paying? Yeah, why are we paying for your wars? Like, regular
we didn't
stuff.
Start it. You started it. Leave them alone.
Now I want to do a cover of We Didn't Start the Fire, but make it American Revolution. So I need more hobbies. And on this week's edition of How Well Do You Know the Bill of Rights, we are going to be focusing on the First Amendment, which is
that covers a lot.
Yes, it is the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, petition, and protest. So we can say what we want. We can practice the religion we want. We can assemble however we want. We could petition the government, and we could protest things that we feel are unjust. In this episode, Michael, I know I recently said that I was wrapping up the Sugar Act, and I am.
No, we all knew you were lying.
Yeah, well, listen. I don't have to tell you more about what the Sugar Act is, but I do have to explain why the whole Sugar Act, Stamp Act situation was so out of pocket. Like,
we're still not getting that dang button, are we, today?
I mean, I'll give it to you for now if you'd like.
I dare say they've started a riot.
Like, they're gonna, but you have to understand why.
It's not as fulfilling if they don't actually riot after the guy does his little ditty.
I know. But without understanding why this was so really unhinged and unheard of and so different from the norms, which, as we've discussed on a previous episode, the way that the social classes and the hierarchies function together, you don't break tradition, and everything about this broke tradition. And without understanding that, you can't really understand why they would do riots about it. So that is the goal today. We are going
contextualize the riots so we're not glorifying violence without provocation and clearly defined goals.
Sorry. Now at this time, so we're post 7 Years' War. It's the early 1760s, and the British want to reorganize the empire with hopes that they can make America submit. The British only had so many crown officials in America, so they could really only flex their authority in the ways that America allowed them to because of salutary neglect. They'd been hands off for so long. And at this point, Americans didn't want independence. They wanted things to stay how they were.
Just give it back.
Yeah.
Just give it back and we're cool. We'll shut up.
Americans were like, we long for a pre-George Grenville time. Like, that's what they wanted. They wanted George to go away. Okay. Now, we're going to start with when the Sugar Act was introduced to the House of Commons. This was in March of 1764. Okay. And Grenville, he has these resolutions that he proposes. There's 24 of them.
And one of them was that promise of the Stamp Act. Like, hey, maybe, probably, maybe we might just start taxing your paper and stuff.
Right.
Just maybe, just like putting that out there.
Right. It was just,
all right, let's blow on right past that and hope no one notices. Go ahead.
Yeah. It was slipped right into the middle. It was the 15th resolution. Now, the other 23 resolutions would become the Sugar Act. But that 15th one, the one slipped right in the middle. Don't look at it. Don't. We don't have to talk about that. We're not even doing anything with that right now. Just to prove it. Look at you like all these other 23. And if you approve the other 23, then you get those 23. We'll make some money. But you don't need to look at the 5th. Don't look at it. Don't look at it. That's because he was plotting, you see. He was plotting because that 15th resolution basically said, hey, if we need to make more money, we can start a stamp tax. And the Stamp Act required a government-issued stamp to be paid for and affixed to all printed materials in the colonies, except books, actually. But this included ship papers, playing cards, court documents, college degrees, pamphlets, almanacs, and more. The colonial governments and courts could not operate without them. Marriage licenses wouldn't be valid without the stamps, and deeds and wills would also be nothing without said stamps. And newspapers, one of Boston's favorite pastimes besides smuggling, couldn't be published without them.
So we've got these silly little stamps that have to go on pretty much every paper good and important document in a time before the internet.
Yeah.
I know it sounds dumb and pedantic to point out, but I often forget how convenient it is to live in a more or less paperless society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everything that we notes passed back and forth among friends. In order to get that dang paper, you need a government stamp. Which I'm sure wasn't cheap. I'm sure that was a penny or two a stamp.
Oh, we'll get to that. Don't worry. Yeah. And because here's the other part to contextualize this, right? The Sugar Act, that is passed into law, approved by the king in March of 1764. Now, it is not going into effect until September of the same year, but it is now passed into law. And the next month, what gets passed, but the Currency Act. So now their paper money, their colonial money, it's null and void. They have to use the British actual like silver backed coins.
There's a line in Hamilton where he's talking about, now this is a little further in the future, but it started here. There's a line in Hamilton where he's like, we have resorted to eating our horses. They only take British money. So all of we can't buy resources from local merchants. We can't, the food is right there, but they will not let us have it. And we can't just steal it or we're no better than the guys but they only accept British money because the paper currency had been dead since 1764 of the colonies where they made it illegal.
Mm-hmm. And at this time, now we have the money has changed. Now we have to pay more money because of the Sugar Act, which is putting taxes and duties on everything, including now you have to pay money in order to do business as a promise to pay the money for the sugar, right? Yeah. And now you're going to have to pay money to put a stamp on all of that paperwork you have to fill out and pay money for so you can conduct trade, and they are in a post-war economic collapse.
So even more so, not only has smuggling been made harder because it's less appealing to the people who were sort of facilitating it, but now they can seize your boat if they think you're smuggling. But if you don't have a stamp on your paper, it would look an awful lot like you're smuggling.
And then they can just seize your stuff.
Even just having like a bill of lading, like an inventory of what is on your boat. If you don't have that silly little government authorized stamp, they're like, well, this is clearly smuggling. It's literally not. Like, but here's the receipts, the literal receipts, not the like gossip receipts. Here's the actual. Nope. No stamp. Nope.
We'll see you in
You're
court,
bad, dude.
In Halifax. Enjoy. You have to go all the way there now in our Admiralty Court, which means there's no jury. If you disagree, come on. Come to Halifax.
And it's our boat now. Bye.
Exactly. And
Ew.
I know. And if you remember, if you don't, that's okay, because I'm gonna remind you right now. The 15th resolution that we might do a stamp tax if we need more money.
Could be mentioned.
It came with this little caveat where George Grenville was like, unless the colonies can GoFundMe the amount we need. Like, if they can tax themselves, if they come up with a means, if they raise the money, we won't have to do the stamps. He has this offer. And the colonial agents, when reporting on these resolutions to the colonies, when they sent them these resolutions, they included notes that were like, yeah, but like Grenville said, we have an entire year to figure it out, or to come up with petitions, or to come up with another means to raise money. Like, how great is that? Here is this offer. But Grenville didn't mean it.
And then Samuel Adams ran his mouth, didn't he?
Well, I mean, yes. But But we can pretty much tell that Grenville never meant that offer, right? Because he is covering his bases and laying the groundwork for the stamp tax when he just slipped the resolution in there and offered the colonies this alternative. But what he was really doing was declaring the right of Parliament to be able to lay this tax. And his goal,
it was 3D chess. Listen, I don't like the decisions made. I don't like the abuses to liberty that, again, from a very modern standpoint, it feels offensive to me. To them, it was only mildly problematic and perhaps indicative that things were going to get worse. So like, we just need to add that context. Part of the reason they didn't flip out because they're like, well, the king can kind of do whatever he wants. And it was the very first flush of people. Well, can he? Like, can he? No. Like, should we just continue to allow him to do whatever he wants like this? But like, also, I want to give George Grenville like an ounce of, I don't want to say credit. That feels like a strong word, but like an ounce of acknowledgement that like the political games he was playing were really impressive.
He was a political mastermind in the worst way.
Yeah. Like, I'm not saying that he did good work, but it's just how clever he was about priming pathways. Like, we're not passing the Stamp Act right now. I'm just making sure that y'all can't actually get in my way when we actually pass this highly lucrative Stamp Act. Because y'all already agreed to it when you passed the Sugar Act.
Yeah.
Technically.
He was very effective. And that is, I think,
an gross, but effective.
Right. It's an interesting thing to me as well, because the Sugar Act, the news of the Sugar Act hits the colonies, and the colonies are kind of like meh about the Sugar Act. They've had the Molasses Act. They smuggled around it. They're like, oh, we'll find a way, right? But they hear about the Stamp Act.
We can find new ways to break the law. Hooray!
Yeah. And the Stamp Act is really what sets them off. Like, hearing about the Stamp Act, like a lot of the petitions sent to the Crown had nothing to do with the Sugar Act and had everything to do with don't do the Stamp Act. Don't do that.
Well, and also I wonder if it's because it had such a broader impact. Like, yeah, sugar was going to impact a lot of industries, but if you were a leather tanner, the Sugar Act wasn't going to be as important to you because the things that it was covering weren't really needed for your industry. But you know what would be? You still have to have documentation for all sorts of stuff that you're doing as a business. So like, it went from a large chunk of colonists to a vast majority of colonists were now impacted.
Yeah. And as I said, Grenville never even meant that offer. It was just political posturing, right? Because the way things would work, if it was a real offer, then the one Grenville made would have followed the established standard. He would have had the Secretary of State for the Southern colonies send letters to all the colonial governors with adequate details so they could actually brainstorm solutions and ideas to avoid
they would need to
Act.
know how much are you on the line for? What are the intervals of payment? Like, just details necessary to basically fundraise.
And the resolutions, they passed the House of Commons in March of 1764. They go to Parliament in April of 1764. They pass, and then the king signs off on it. Now it's law. And Grenville has this Stamp Act hanging overhead. Hey, but if you guys come up with your money, right? Now, here's where our agents come in. Because I am so glad that I did such deep research on the London agents, because they play such an integral part of this story. The London agents who represented the colonies, they received their powers from the Council and House of Representatives in the colonies. Whatever they agreed upon to send in a letter to their London agent then had to be approved by the colonial governor. So they were empowered by the government of the colonies to represent said colonies, kind of in a lobbyist type of way to members of Parliament and the House of Commons, right?
Okay.
Now, the London agent for Massachusetts was one Jasper Mauden. I don't know if I'm saying his last name right. We're just going to call him Jasper. Battle scars. So...
lore drop immediately.
I'm just referencing Twilight. Which is better, honestly. I told you I've been reading Thomas Hutchinson's book, The History of the Massachusetts Bay Colony.
That was my Jasper stare.
I loved it. And in this history book that Thomas Hutchinson was writing, he wrote about how Jasper was known for propagating the gospel among the native people, which is, in modern sense, gross. At the time, celebrated, which is more gross. But the people in New England thought they showed Jasper's integrity. And when the Massachusetts House realized that his brother managed the agencies in London, Jasper was appointed. They saw him as good people with good principles, right? Samuel Adams didn't agree. So big surprise. Samuel Adams, Thomas Hutchinson, they don't agree on things. So Samuel...
Hey, sidebar. No, I'm going to derail this entirely for just a second, because while you were doing... Now, I now know what you were researching at the time. While you were doing this research, you sent me a little pamphlet that Thomas Hutchinson wrote and did not himself publish. It was published well after his death, when it was found in his documents much later. It is a treatise on witchcraft in the colonies at the time. Like, he tries to do this like whole historical review of witchcraft for reasons. And Thomas Hutchinson had time on his hands, I guess. I don't know. But
well, it probably has to do with his aunt who was banished from the colony in the late 1600s. Yeah. There's a whole connection. I could red tape all of this. It's pretty cool.
But that man, when he writes, he's just really... He was so proud of himself.
He was so proud of
himself a good writer, and like
he was very arrogant. And it's funny because the British, like the Crown, he sent so many letters because he was, an agent.
He was a lieutenant governor,
the Crown,
and later
right?
a governor.
They all thought he was really arrogant too, so they appreciated.
Like, it bleeds through. Yeah. Even with, I am not very good at reading this era's documentation because of the language they use. And the source that Tori sent me is the one that already corrected all of the weird typographical things that make it difficult to read primary sources, because you've got the SF thing, you've got the BD thing, you've got the AE thing. They had different fonts and scripting. It makes it hard to read sometimes.
Yeah.
This source like fixed all that, so it appears in regular written English, but is still the same language.
Yes.
Oh
it is
my
just a
gosh, it's just drippy.
Yeah.
Like, and I've read Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and George Washington, who were great writers.
Yeah.
Nothing on Tommy Boy. Holy crap, Tommy Boy.
Yeah. Thomas was, he was very posh.
Tie a lily to your tongue, boy. I need you to stop.
And it's all of his footnotes and annotations that he writes inside of it. Like, I'm very much enjoying reading Thomas Hutchinson's book.
Okay, and then I've derailed us onto, on this episode of Bibliophage. Available everywhere you find your favorite podcasts.
So in the history book that Thomas wrote, he's like, everyone loved Jasper, and then Samuel Adams didn't.
Actually,
he was hard to impress.
Samuel Adams is the American Revolution Reddit. Actually,
kind of. Yeah. And Samuel didn't really trust Jasper because he thought that Jasper was a little bit too comfortable with the British officials. And his brother, that Thomas was like, this guy's great. Samuel was like, he's a close ally of Lord Bute and the king. And Jasper, along with a lot of other colonial agents in London, they were praised in London for submissive cooperation.
Which, if your goal is to basically lobby on behalf of the colonies, you would prefer your guy be more aligned with the interests, values, and awareness of the colonies, not buddy with Lord Butt and G Cubed and the peerage over there.
Yeah. And I wanted to present these two different views because realistically, we are inclined to believe that Samuel Adams was definitely in the right here. However, there's two sides here, and these sides about the London agent are very polarized. But after these agents, including Jasper Battlescars, after these agents had reported back to the colonies about these resolutions, including the notes about the 15th resolution, the Stamp Act with deferment options, they were like, wait, what did we even tell the colonies? Because we told them that there was this proposal from Grenville, but we didn't tell them what it was. Wait, do we even know what this proposal is? Like, do we know? So,
okay, we wrote it. Which one of you wrote it?
Yeah, we were
you want to explain it? Share it with the class.
Yeah.
What do you mean? How did we get it in there then?
Wait, we told them that Grenville said there was other options, but we didn't tell them what the options were. Wait, we don't know the options. And so before they even had a chance to talk to the colonies
Meanwhile,
again,
I've got a picture of Grenville combing his mustache.
Just maniacal. Yeah, I get the same vibe. And so before the colonial agents even had a chance to talk to the colonies after letting them know about these resolutions in the incoming Sugar Act, in mid-May 1764, the London agents called a meeting with Grenville on their own accord. They were like, actually, maybe we do need to talk to Grenville because we want to accurately report to the colonies what's going on here and what their options really are. So
Jasper mess it up? Jasper messes it up.
I don't know that he necessarily messes it up as much as...
No, he messes it up. That sounds like he messes it up.
It's more to the idea of when we talk about the social hierarchy and everyone knows their place, they can call this meeting, but they can't really do anything because of their place. So these agents, they go into this meeting and they want to know how much money had to go into the GoFundMe to get out of the stamps. And basically, as soon as the meeting starts, Grenville's like, I'm not changing my mind. And he thought it was pretty weird that the agents were trying to figure out how to get around the stamps and that they ought to just approve of the stamps.
Dude, you literally told us we could get around the stamps. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Bro.
It's like you could smell the gas he's lighting, right? And so he thinks it's pretty weird that they're trying to get around it. He thinks they ought to just approve of the stamps on every piece of paper as far as the eye can see.
You know, at some point, did any of them walk up and go, all right, put the stamps on the island inhabitants here? Go ahead,
already had stamps.
Oh, did they have stamps at the time?
They did. And
so he's like, well, they don't complain. They can literally get beheaded by the king personally. Could that be maybe an impact?
Well, and he went on. Grenville went on to complain to these agents about the difficulties that the crown would endure if they let the colonists go through with any scheme they could come up with to tax themselves. And he wouldn't answer any question directly. Very much in the political way of like, hey, what is your plan? And then I'm going to talk about something else entirely because this is what I want you to know.
Concept of a plan.
Yeah. And when the agent said that they needed to know all of the details of the tax so they could figure out if they actually approved or disapproved of the stamps, or to get an actual opinion, because, hey, we have a year for the colonies to form an opinion, which means we need the details so that they could form an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Grenville pretty much shrugged. He's like, I don't know. The bill's not written yet. We don't have the details. It was pointed out to him by the agents that asking the colonies to agree to the tax without knowing what it meant was asking them to agree to not know. Like you're asking them to consent to something that they don't know what they're consenting to.
Right. Not only you're never going to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to paint everything in the colonies green. Why? You have to paint it green. Okay, so we painted it green. Why have we painted it green? It's green now. Like, right. Okay, so I hear you saying that, but it doesn't make any sense, and I would like it to not be green anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Grenville's answer when they were like, hey, you're asking us to consent to not knowing what we're consenting to. Grenville was like, the details don't really matter. Everyone knows about the stamps here in England, and we're going to model the American one after this one. But he did agree to another.
Basically, Grenville was like, yeah.
And the funny thing is as soon as he got the Sugar Act passed, he started working on the Stamp Act because he wanted it ready for the session of Parliament that would open in 1765. Like he was like, this will be ready in 1 year, right? But he did agree to another meeting before the next session of Parliament with the agents if they agreed to try to get the colonies on board with the stamps, with a little caveat he added there, which was basically like, yeah, don't bother protesting about not having money. Like, it's not going to carry any weight. We don't care. Like, the whole vibe was like, stamps, because I said so. But he said all of that, everything in that meeting he said with charisma. And also because they all know their place, the agents thought that maybe he could be willing to budge, and they did not tell the colonists that any idea they had was actually hopeless, because at this point it was. And
right.
now we're gonna hop back across the pond, because in the same time period, we are in the late spring, early summer period. And obviously, we're going to be talking about Samuel Adams, who got mad and stayed mad after the land bank debacle, where the government like ruined his family over a whole thing. They approved of the money, and then they're like, actually, just kidding. You're liable for the money, regular things.
Right.
And when he hears about the Sugar Act, he's absolutely furious. And he made it his problem to make it everyone else's problem. And he was incredulous about instructions not being sent to the London agent before the Sugar Act. Because of the way that the communication worked, the colonists would have heard, and they did hear, which I learned about in Thomas Hutchinson's book, that this could be coming. And the Massachusetts House of Representatives and Council, they were like, we should send a special agent about this to make sure it doesn't happen. But then they couldn't agree, and they're like, we'll get to it next time. Next time, the Sugar Act already passed.
The Sugar Act is passed. It's not in effect yet, but it's done.
Exactly. It's already done. And so they never got around to sending those instructions. And Samuel Adams, who's not an elected official at the time, he is just beyond himself. How could you not send instructions? So he was chosen at the town meeting to be the one to write instructions about how to navigate this. And so he writes these instructions. It's the Declaration of Expectations. It's widely accepted. It calls for non-importation agreements. Subtly.
Basically boycotting before they actually named it boycotting, because that was a much later term.
And colonial union, which has not been done, right? And Samuel Adams' buddy, James Otis Jr.,
also,
Lightning Boy.
I could see how the crown would start to get threatened by colonial union.
Yeah. And I do think it's interesting when we consider how slow the flow of information was, right? Because the elected officials in Massachusetts were like, okay, well, we'll just table this until our next session in the spring, not knowing that this was going to be on the table just a couple months beforehand in Parliament. And then we have Parliament, who has no idea what's actually going on in the colonies. And they think that they are doing the best for the entire empire, and they are trying to kind of unite the empire, not the colonies. Don't unite colonies. We want to unite the empire. You're all dependent on the mother country. Give me your money. And then you have Samuel Adams, who is like, why aren't the colonial agents doing anything? But then you have the colonial agents who are literally calling for meetings with Grenville. Nobody knows what's going on.
Right. They're all trying, and they're all like determining, well, I'm not actually going to tell them, because honestly, what are they going to do about it? So it was just one giant miscommunication trope for all of 1764.
Even if they had tried to tell them, it's going to take weeks, months.
Right.
What if the letter gets lost at sea?
And balls may have already been kicked down the hill by the time that boat arrives.
Yeah.
I imagine there was quite a few things like Romeo and Juliet moments where somebody made a rash decision and then a note arrived. Oh, crap. I didn't have to do that.
Yeah. And Samuel Adams, he wrote these instructions. He's not an elected official, but his buddy, James Otis Jr., Lightning Boy, is. And he brings these instructions to the Massachusetts House, and Francis Bernard shuts it down.
Is that where he dismissed the whole?
Well, okay. So I found this moment in the Thomas Hutchinson book, and he was there. I am so obsessed with this book. I get so excited about it, right? And so he basically says that this session was It broke the tradition of over 40 years when the House of Representatives, which was kind of headed by Otis, wrote this letter to the agent without consulting the council, because these two houses had to work together. That was how instructions went to the agent. And then once they came to a conclusion, the governor would have to sign off on it before it would get sent. But the House was like, you know what we'll do, though? What if we wrote a letter inspired by Otis's pamphlet, which was The Rights of Colonists, and included Samuel's instructions with like the non-importation and colonial union, and we didn't consult the council. And then when they tried to call us on it, we got really, belligerent about it. And we're like, no, we're going to stomp our foot down and say, no, this is what we want. But the council was like, no, you can't do this. And so the House created a committee to distribute the letter and the instructions across the continent, which is the point that Bernard shuts it down. And this was, again, the first time the House acted on a colony-wide matter without consulting the other parties that were supposed to be involved. And this letter to the agent that they wrote, including the stuff from Otis's pamphlet and Samuel Adams' instructions, it basically boiled down to the silence from the colony shouldn't be taken as consent. How can colonies be taxed without the voice of an American parliament? Like, they are saying we need representation. But I did want to quote the footnotes from this part of Hutchinson's book. I need to read you an excerpt here.
Footnote Hutchison, go ahead.
So in writing about the chaos in this house and how all tradition is broken, and James Otis Jr., like, they hated each other so much. And he was trying so hard in his book to seem like he didn't hate Otis. He's just telling the history. But as arrogant as he was, his hate for Otis was also on that page, okay?
Strong.
And so in the footnotes of this session of the government in Massachusetts. And so Hutchinson says in the footnotes about this session of government in Massachusetts Bay Colony, I have related this transaction more circumstantial than otherwise I should have done, because it shows, on the one hand, the endeavors of a small party only to increase the breach between Parliament and the colonies, and on the other hand, the disposition of a much superior party to promote such measures as tended to heal the breach and restore and preserve the union of the several parts of the empire. And so basically, this is Hutchinson saying that the guys with the most power and money and on Hutchinson's side, they had the willingness to stroke Parliament's ego. They were the good guys, and the fellas who wanted to look at what they deserved as rights.
They were the tiny, inconsequential.
Yeah.
We don't have to listen to them. They're just just colonists. They're stupid.
And they were clearly just trying to cause problems. And the House, they did approve this letter. And then they created a committee to distribute this letter throughout the colonies, which is when Bernard heard about that and shut them down until October.
Go home, you punks.
Yes. Now, I am going to call this next part here, because now we're moving into the summer, because just because he shut the House down doesn't mean things stopped happening, right?
Yeah.
And this is the summer of mail, because by the summertime, the Sugar Act is a law, but it's not enacted yet.
It doesn't kick in until September.
But Grenville is already hard at work on his beloved Stamp Act. He wants it ready to go the second that Parliament could hear it in 1765. Now, Grenville puts Thomas Whately, who is a member of Parliament with a bunch of titles, as they like to collect back then. He had one title specifically relevant to the story I'm telling you right now, okay? Which was Secretary to the Treasury under George Grenville. And so Grenville puts Thomas to work. And I do need you to know, while I was writing this episode, I looked into Whately because he was just a name referenced in several books. And I was like, I want to know about this guy. So here's some fast facts. Some of them could be fun. So he served as Secretary to the Treasury under George Grenville from April 5th, 1764 until July of 1765, when Grenville lost his gig as King G3's right-hand man, at which point Whately pancaked and he flipped over to the opposition against Grenville. But before he flipped into opposition to George Grenville, when he was still working under him, he wrote a pamphlet to argue with a pamphlet that was criticizing Grenville. So he was defending Grenville until the second he could oppose him without it affecting his reputation because of the way that class stuff worked, right? You know your place.
There's something brown on his nose.
Yes. And Thomas Whately might be most well known for authoring, are you ready for this?
No.
Observations on Modern Gardening, illustrated by descriptions in 1770, which was the first of its kind in books about English landscape gardening.
You know what? A man's got to have his passions. I appreciate it. Flower boy.
Yeah. So anyway, Grenville tasks Gardener Tom with helping him to prepare this new stamp bill for 1765. And
we do not take any of these men seriously. I just
Should we?
need you to know.
And Gardener Tom, with this new job to help prepare the Stamp Act, he wrote letters to the folks he did know in America, which were very few, but he was trying to gain a better understanding of how things worked across the pond. And so he first writes his buddy in Connecticut with an extended interview amount of questions, such as, how much money would we make on this side of the ocean if we put a lower duty on trade agreements and paper bonds and stuff like that? But then we put a high duty on things like land grants, but then we like middle grounded it on law proceeding stuff. And if we did do a stamp duty, do you think people would like be mad or inconvenienced and like try not to pay it? So he sends all these questions to his buddy in Connecticut. And then he writes another buddy in Boston with more questions. And he's like, hey, pal, there was a Stamp Act in your colony back in 1755, right? And there was.
How'd that go for you?
I looked into it. It went perfectly well. Let me explain why. In May of 1755, when William Shirley was the governor of Massachusetts, and he was well liked, the Massachusetts General Court enacted its own Stamp Act at the beginning of the 7 Years' War to build more forts. The act was only in effect for 2 years, at which point the war was raging and Massachusetts expected Britain to pay more of its own bills. It never produced a controversy because the colonists' own representatives passed the act and the money stayed in the colonies for the colonists. And so now,
so like it's not at no point when we are discussing this early part of the revolution, this first stirring of maybe we don't want to be imperial schmucks. Mm-hmm. They are not saying, listen to me. They are not saying we disagree with being taxed. We are aware of the importance of taxes as long as we know what the taxes are being used for. We believe and agree that the taxes are being used for mutually beneficial endeavors and that we are protecting and enhancing the lives of the people paying the taxes. Are you collecting my Oklahoma-made money and supporting Oklahomans and me and my family in positive, growth-focused ways?
Right.
That's what they're saying. They were cool with the Stamp Act when the money that they were paying for the stamps supported them. They're not cool when all of that money is being floated back across the friggin' ocean.
And when they had a say in it and what it was for, because they wanted to better their society. What they didn't want was to fund Britain's military industrial complex. Like that was their issue, as there was no representation.
We don't want to continue funding military industrial complexes.
We don't. But Whately, Gardener Tom, after he asks about the previous Stamp Act, he says, so you guys had these stamps. How did it work out for you? How much did you make? What difficulties did you encounter? And what objections were made to it? Do you have any advice for us? The greatest difficulty...
How can we tax you better? Go ahead, tell me.
Literally. We don't want your consent. We want your advice. And he goes on in this letter to say that the greatest difficulty we have is trying to figure out what to be stamped exactly and how much the different stamps should cost. So could you give me the names of your courts and their records? And do you have any lawyer friends who can also assist in this? And what are your writs like? Are they like ours? We don't want to make these stamps a huge burden, but could we stamp you all like we're stamping the Englishmen here? But if you think that we should make any changes between our stamps and yours, which ones? Please Also explain why.
Listen, I'm a good writer and a decent artist. I'd have made so much money forging stamps.
Wait until we get to the protest stamps they were making.
So much money forging stamps. It's just,
I would
have been a bad person in this time. I would not have.
You would have been friends with Samuel Adams.
Over on the corner of Ash.
You would have been down at the Long Wharf. You'd been in the Green Dragon Tavern. Like you'd be there. You'd be a patriot. We love it. We love it. But
wait, you just need a new doodle? I can do a new doodle.
I am telling you that the whole Stamp Act controversy is one of my favorite things to explore when talking about the revolution. And you are going to be just as into it as I am as we continue down this path, okay? But Gardner Tom was not the only one sending letters. We also had the Earl of Halifax, Secretary of State for the Southern Department, who could have been sending letters about options to stamps like George Grenville said there would be. He could have been sending letters including those options to the governors, but instead he sent a circular letter, which is basically chainmail. It's basically like a mass email, if you've never heard of the term circular letter. He sent a circular letter to all of the colonial governors announcing the impending stamps and asking for a list of all the paper made use of for the public. So we're talking law proceedings.
Hey, what sort of documents do you have so we know which stamps to like make for you guys to sell and then give us the money?
Yeah.
Dude, we only have one piece. It's just like this one little thing that someone gets when they buy a cow. That's the only paper we use. Weirdly, we all have really good memories.
You are going to be so shocked how often everyone in the colonies just has a sudden case of amnesia when it comes to talking to the crown.
I know. Actually, I don't know, dude. Hey, did you see who took our cannons? No.
There were cannons?
What cannons?
You were watching.
I
don't. Now the sun
dude,
was in my eyes.
Dude, your dad like took a cannonball to the chest. What? Where? I didn't know that.
I have a dad. That's weird.
Yeah. Never had that. He went to get milk a long time ago.
But here's the thing.
I broke Tori there.
The circular letters were sent to the royal governors, except for Rhode Island. Rhode Island had an elected governor. But the circular...
Screw you, especially Rhode Island. Try harder, be real.
Rhode Island is a fun one to get into. But this circular letter is sent to people who they get a paycheck from the crown. So they're more willing to comply with this. So they have to provide information about the paper used for law proceedings, grants, securities, landed money, with proper descriptions of everything that they're using in public means for paper. So if Parliament decides... Because again, we're still pretending it's maybe. If Parliament decides to go through with this 15th resolution that, makes it so they could do a Stamp Act, that they can officially enact it and lessen the burden. Now, I do think that they meant the British burden, not the burden to the people having to pay for it. But either way, the data that this Earl of Halifax collected, he sent it to Gardner Tom. And Whately, he used these reports and his own data collecting to draft this bill. And here's what's interesting. Because of all this data he collected, most of the American rates were lower than the English rates, right? But he did kind of like put in a little like clause there that once the Americans were used to paying the tax, they could up the cost. Like let's get them used to it first. However,
it's an introductory rate. It's an introductory.
We're gonna get them locked
adjustable rate tax.
Once that first year's over, once you have the special promotion wears off your account, prices are going up.
$4.99 a month for the next 3 months, and then it's $172 a week. Why do y'all do that? Stop it!
Stop it. However, the interesting part here is there were a few places that the American stamps were more expensive than the British counterpart. And our boy, Gardner Tom, he said, quote, The duties upon admissions to any of the professions or to the university degrees should certainly be as high as they are in England. It would indeed be better if they were raised both here and there considerably, in order to keep mean persons out of those situations in life which they disgrace. Yeah, he basically, to translate that to modern times.
Y'all poor folk, like, gross. You don't need to be bettering yourself. Stay down there in the mud.
You are not of the higher class, so you are a disgrace.
You don't even need to get to college.
You should not have education. You should not have a learned profession. We are going to hike the prices up. It is now only there for the privileged few. The moneyed few can now afford this because...
Barrier to entry was already pretty high at this point. Like, not as high as it is now, but
yeah.
Comparatively speaking, it was already, because keep in mind, John Hancock had to be adopted by a whole very rich uncle just so one of the Hancock kids could go to school.
Yeah. And are you ready?
Barrier to entry was already extant, and now they're like, and we're going to add a stamp to make it even.
Yeah. So we have all of these letters coming from the crowd to the colonies asking how to tax them better. But then we have a Mr. Francis Bernard, Royal Governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, writing a letter to his friend in Britain, not any official. So this letter didn't really matter. But he wrote basically the event of something that happened with the government in Massachusetts. He detailed this event, okay? And he basically tells his friend that the members of the Massachusetts House wanted to reconvene. Even though he had banned them from convening until October, they wanted to reconvene to figure out how to prevent the stamp tax. They had heard from their agent, Jasper Battlescars, that George Grenville said they could prevent the Stamp Act if they taxed themselves, and that they wanted to do it immediately. Like, right meow. And I told them, I don't think there's anything more we can do right now, because how can we enact an actual tax to meet their money goals if they haven't told us how much money they want? And he went on to say, if every colony wanted to tax itself, then they would all need goals assigned to each individually. But I promised them that we would have another Massachusetts Bay Colony House of Representatives and Council play date in October, so that we can still get a letter to our London agent before the next parliamentary session. So he's like, there's really nothing we can do. And not in a way of like, I agree with this, but they didn't give us any information. They said we could, but how do we do this? There is more to it. We can't just start taxing ourselves. That's not going to matter without being able to connect the dots.
Well, and again, he's the governor. He is being paid by the crown. He views his loyalty to the crown and to Britain, not to the colonies. I don't know. I know a couple of the governors, 100%. They went over, they were governor of their colony, and the minute their sentence was up, they hightailed it right back across the ocean because they had no interest in living rough.
Yeah.
Like, they did their duty to the crown, and then they were out. And then they had all the bonuses and all the, like, good job, pat on the back, because they did the governor shtick over in the colonies, but they had no interest in the colonies.
Yeah.
They were just doing it because it was politically or financially advantageous.
Exactly. And a lot of them would go over to the colonies to make money and come home rich. And Bernard has now, as this royal governor, has sent this letter explaining the situation. And this is a really accurate representation. Bernard's letters are actually a huge source of good data for historians. He was very detailed, and much like Hutchinson wanted to be in his writing, he was actually pretty unbiased in just detailing the events as they happened without his spin on it for the most part. He had some issues with Samuel Adams too. We're not there yet. Whereas George Grenville, who is the prime minister, who is totally overhauling everything about how the relationship between the colonies and the mother country worked, he thinks that the colonies really need to feel more dependent on the mother country, and that Parliament needed to flex their authority, because truly Parliament hadn't even talked about the American colonies in years. They had other concerns. There was a war. There's all this stuff going on. They don't need to talk about America. It wasn't a priority. And then Grenville's like, I'm making it one. In the same way that Samuel was like, I'm making your problem a problem here. Grenville was like, I am making that problem our problem here.
No, see, George Grenville is just a goose. Like, it's just a goose. A goose will get personally offended about something.
Yeah.
And then it's not his George, it's Goose Gaggleville. That's who the prime minister was. It's Goose Gaggleville. Not George Grenville. Goose Gaggleville.
We're gonna have to start having a key.
We've got geese now.
We're gonna have to start keeping a key up of who these people actually were. We're straying so far from their actual names. Yeah.
Battle scars. But I promise you, from here on out, people who listen to this episode, they're gonna be like, George Grenville was a goose. Gaggleville. Yep, George Grenville. I got it. Like the historical context sealed. Well, you're welcome.
I'm gonna shorten it for George the Goose. I think that's
George the Goose. All right.
George the Goose. There we go. Okay. So George the Goose is like, hey, we need to flex our authority. Parliament's like, don't we have authority? And he's like, no, because once the Sugar Act goes out, right? Suddenly these petitions start coming in and they're kind of like questioning Parliament's authority. And Parliament was like, ouch, my ego. Because Parliament was basically like an authoritarian parent trying to maintain power and control over an autonomous adult that had already moved out.
Look what you made me do.
Yeah. And so very quickly, this entire scheme that George the Goose had started to shift away from raising money to putting America in its place. And then suddenly the House of Commons is like, we're not accepting petitions no matter what they say because of how many of you denounce parliamentary authority. We don't want to hear it. And some London agents actually thought that they should unite in a petition of their own, not to deny authority, but to try to establish a precedent about receiving petitions prior to legislating and taking the money of the colonists. And the petition was drawn up. The London agents' petition was drawn up, but most were too afraid to sign it, so it was abandoned. Remember when I said the First Amendment? How many times has that been violated so far? They can't petition. They're afraid
they can't petition. Are we about to learn why they decided to do the right to protest?
Oh, yeah. We're getting there. But the London agents actually tried to get London merchants on their side in opposition because the London merchants were already feeling the effects of non-importation, but not enough to do anything yet, right?
Yeah.
And so by the time fall rolls around, the Massachusetts House has come back together in October. They finally write their petition, which isn't going to get heard anyway because Parliament was like, no. We don't want to hear it because I said so. By the time fall rolls around, Massachusetts Bay Colony, their entire government can come back together because Francis Bernard said, it's okay, guys, we can have our play date. It's October now. And they write a petition and they write a letter to Jasper Battlescars, and it's not gonna get heard. And Jasper's all bummed out about it because he knows that Hutchinson had his hands in that petition and that it did not denounce parliamentary authority, but it didn't matter anymore because Parliament already said, nah, we're good. But Samuel Adams was still hard at work going to every social club he didn't belong to and promoting non-importation. And he is writing all of these articles in the paper, and he is really angry at Hutchinson, and everyone knew that all the time. And then we move into winter, where Samuel Adams realized that he did fail to unite the colonies after the Sugar Act, but he also got married. And now we are at the official end of 1764, which means we're
still not going to get a riot. No. You don't get to promise me a riot because you promised me a riot at the end of like 3 episodes. We still don't have a riot.
I'm not promising a riot this time. I'm just promising the year 1765. You'll have to take the win. I will leave 1764.
All right.
So
we only spent like 3 episodes in 1764. We spent a lot longer getting up to 1763. So
that's true. But now we'll be able to round up to 1770 in theory. So thank you.
Round up? No, we can.
Thank you all for listening to Founded. I hope you found something interesting. Drop an email at foundedhistory@gmail.com and let me know what you want to find out next. And please contact advertising@airwavemedia.com if you would like to advertise on our podcast. And be sure to subscribe, leave a rating, a review, to hit all the buttons, and then go check out Bibliophage and Childproof, our other podcasts. We will see you next time. Well, you'll see us.